Okay. So let's start by just going over your last observation. To put in Gigboard. So this was the island weather. No, you started with the island weather report chart, and you use. It seems like the next lesson was like an initial background knowledge.
Yeah, that was the first lesson of the unit.
Okay. Yeah. So. And so just to bring out some glows, you use that chart to like engage them in understanding the concept that you could, if there are no measurements, then we can't compare the two. And so I think that was a great way to like segue into what you needed them to understand. And you did checks for understandings as you went through the chart. You did a turn and talk, so the engagement strategies were there. You had an explanation, like you started to read it. It was like after you did these questions, you read like this part, and then like you moved into a turn and talk. Was the point from that chart like that you have to have measurements
that are the same in order so that you can compare them.
Okay. Which then set them up to go into the turn and talk. So that was another like built-in engagement strategy in your lesson. You were very specific with your turn and talk question. What makes it hard to compare the weather on these islands? And you gave them a set time, 1 minute to discuss this with your partner. And for the most part, everybody went right to discussing what they should have. And then the scholar was able to tell you. It tells you that it's hot, but it doesn't tell you how much it's hot. And then you stamp. You go back in, and I really like it, and we'll talk about this. I don't know if you've seen this feedback already, but you go in and stamp, and you say, if they gave actual measurements, then all the measurements need to be the same so that we can compare. So you use the academic language there, and I was just, the feedback, the grow would be, how can we then get them to use that same language, right? You did a call and response.
So I will say about the academic language, that was the first day that we had talked about temperature, precipitation, and today, different class, but I was just reading we did a book today with SRU, and they were using, there was this much precipitation on this day. Perfect. The temperature, what was the temperature range on this day? The temperature was between 30 and 39. So they are starting to use that language.
Academic language, perfect.
There was also only 17 of them in SRU today.
So you have plenty of engagement strategies embedded in. You did the turn and talk. You did a call and response. The kids are always so engaged in your experiments. And like it was obvious that they wanted to participate and talk about what they were seeing because all hands went up to come up and do the activity. And it also helped. It's one thing in science to hear your teacher say comparing rainfall and the measurements need to be the same. But it's a whole other thing to be able to actually visualize it with the cups, and like letting them, visualize what the rain looks like in the measurements.
And yesterday they worked in fours and all had their own different cups of different temperatures of water. Perfect. And they all got to put their fingers in it. And we talked about just like what day of the week was that? Tuesday. We talked about we can't compare rainfall based on cubes and cups. Yesterday we talked about we can't compare temperature based on how our fingers feel in the water.
Right.
So we're leading to today, we read a book about this boy who keeps a log, and tomorrow, Monday, we're going to go out.
Okay.
We're going to go outside and measure temperature and precipitation. I have a rain gauge that I'm going to put outside today, and we're going to measure temperature and precipitation and wind and cloud cover on Monday.
That's so awesome.
I really like how this curriculum builds.
Yeah, me too.
On it.
Yep, I like that too.
It's, yeah.
Okay.
One thing about Tuesday's lesson that I would have changed is that the chart was hard for everybody to see on the smart board. And wish that I would have put that in the packet so that they could have all seen it and accessed it, because it was hard for some of them to see.
Great minds think alike, because I put consideration. Some scholars may have struggled to see the information. So yeah, basically the same thing. I think that would have allowed for a little bit more discussion. Around, like, it seems like the kids were like sitting closer. Were the ones...
they were getting it, and basically we had to explain it to everybody else. So that because not every, so this is the packet that I have curated for the first chapter.
Okay.
This is everything that Amplify gives me for the second chapter.
Okay.
I cut a lot of it because I don't have time
okay.
to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
But like that chart is not in their lesson materials, so I need to like cut that and add that in, because I do think that's worthy for them and to be able to read charts.
Right. And I honestly thought that was like an intentional part of the lesson, that you were like moving to like using a chart when you document.
Well, we are, and they're going to start charting the weather every day themselves. So they're going to be creating their own charts and tables. So that was the first chart and table that we saw, and none of the measurements matched, but it would have been more effective if everybody had that in front of them. So
okay, well, we were on the same page with that. That's awesome. And like you said, the girl was just about the academic language, but like you said, that was the first day that you introduced the topic. So like even at the end, like maybe stamping, like having them stamp using the language that they learned from that day. Which leads me into one more thing that we talked about, that we actually just was in a meeting about criteria for success. So question, do you do like some type of exit ticket? I really liked how they had to draw. So they drew the X and Y, and they showed, did they write a sentence with that?
Yeah. So at the bottom, they were supposed to write a sentence. Which cup had more water?
Okay.
Using this data.
Okay.
And they had to tell me how they knew.
Okay. So, and I don't want you to go back. If this is already printed, then don't worry about going back. So I guess the next piece, the next action step would be to
add the criteria for success.
Right.
Do you have a complete sentence? Do you have a reason or a piece of evidence that tells how you know which cup had more water?
Exactly. Yeah. Like we were talking about this in our meeting, and I think schools are at just different points, but we told the ESE team who brought it up that our teachers like know know how to do this. So so sure. You could just the ESE team and us want to see like criteria for success at the end of like when you have an exit ticket or something like that.
Okay.
And it could be on the paper or posted on the board, but I think it should be like posted on the paper because to address that situation.
This is printed. This is going to take us to mid next week.
Okay.
So I can put it on the board for mid next week, and then for chapter 2, which will start back half of next week, I'll put it in their packets.
Okay. All right. And so, like, is this
This was a do now.
Okay.
We don't do these every day because of time, but I had to prep. I had to keep hot and ice water cold and hot all day, so I had to prep their cups of water. So we did a do now while I was setting this up.
Okay.
And then they felt with their fingers, and then we measured each cup with thermometers, and they read the thermometers and recorded the temperature.
Perfect.
So there was no exit ticket for that day because we did that as a class, and they had a hard time. That was the first time they've read a thermometer. So I helped them read the thermometer, so it wasn't something they were engaging with on their own. But then Monday, they're gonna start charting this, and their criteria for success will be that do you have the date? Do you have the time? Is your temperature listed correctly? Do you have degrees Fahrenheit, not just a number?
Yeah. Okay.
You have labels with your precipitation.
Okay, perfect. And like you said, you can just put it on the board, and then when you recreate the packets, we'll just add it to the packets. So I'm going to make that the action step.
Okay.
And thinking about criteria for success, like remember, like when you are, since we talked about academic language, try to set them up to use academic language. I know it's like tricky, but we want to at least encourage them to try to use that academic language in their answer, so we can include that as a part of our criteria for success when we have it doing a written response.
So their written response comes at the end of every chapter. And that's the grade. I take one other grade, and then that's the grade that I take, the written response, and I do grade on, do you have academic language? Are you using the vocabulary? And I make a word bank on the board for them to use. So, what words would you need to know how to spell so that we can get them? And so, like we haven't done one for this unit yet, but in the last unit, they would say magnetic force and gravity and pulls and or balanced forces and unbalanced forces. So they created their own word bank that I put up on the board so that they could use that language in their written response for the end of the chapter.
Perfect. That's awesome. So continue to do that with them, because that's a good teacher move.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to review, what action step are we gonna put in place?
Adding a criteria for success into each lesson.
And do you understand the impact, or do you see the impact that it will have?
Yes, it lets them know what I'm looking for and helps them to tick all the boxes so that they can be as successful as possible.
Have we been RTQing? Like, remember we used to...
I was told we don't do RTQ anymore. Claire?
No, that's not true.
So
the poster may not be there.
I don't think I don't have the poster, but they need to RTQ.
Right. So I'm gonna make that executive just to
so
say that, and it doesn't have to. So, like, for example,
I think it's important too, and I think we don't explicitly teach it anymore. But the sentences that I'm getting they answer the question, but they're garbage sentences. And I care in science, I care more about the answer than I do the sentence. However, we do a lot of reading and a lot of writing in this curriculum, and it can be a place to embed it in, and we can underline the question together, underline the part of the question together that we can RTQ.
Right, because it doesn't have to be necessarily that we start off like we're going to grade you on. But
like this question should have been, the cup that had more water was cup Y because.
Right. So maybe even like when we don't really, when we don't really, I don't want to say don't care, but when we're not necessarily looking for them to RTQ for a grade, we can still like give them a sentence point.
Right.
The cup that had more water, and then you let them finish the rest, just to get them exposed to RTQing.
Absolutely.
Because we know that's important.
Yeah.
Because how are we going to get them to become writers if they're writing half sentences? But we won't put that on your plate now.
I know that we're recording this, but I really.
Okay. You want me to stop?
No, because whoever's going to look at this needs to hear it.
Okay.
I really see the detriment of not teaching writing explicitly every day.
I thought your third grade was.
We don't have time, so our journaling time, writing time, is after the 20 minutes after recess, between recess and lunch, where we go to the bathroom and wash hands, and by the time we get back, it's lunchtime.
Oh, okay. Because I remember it being, we were trying to figure out how third grade was the only group that had it on their schedule. But
right. It's not really Kubiak is the only one that has time for journaling because she has a sink in her classroom and the kids come up and wash their hands while they journal. But even that is not explicit writing instruction.
Right.
Like SPOs and completing the sentence. Like, is this a complete sentence? Is this not a complete sentence?
Okay. So maybe we can find a way to, I know we can't do it every day, but like to plan in time maybe throughout the units to embed.
Because I know that they're using the KIP writing, but it's just not every day.
Oh, they are using the KIP writing? I haven't seen.
I don't know. I thought I saw some of the lessons that I had planned that they were revamping because I've done all the writing unit for the last.
So there is some time.
Sometimes. But
it's not.
They used to have 70 minutes of writing every day.
Right. And
now we have accelerations instead. So I see the benefit and the need for accelerations, but also like the other part of that is they're not getting writing instruction every day.
Okay.
And when they took that air test, it was like, write a paragraph. They're like, write a multi-paragraph response.
Yeah.
A lot of them just got so overwhelmed they didn't write anything.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
And I mean, I'm not teaching to the test, but at the end of third grade, you should know what a multi-paragraph response is.
Right.
Air test or no air test.
Right. That's just a standard. That's a standard that we're supposed to
Correct.
be.
It is a standard.
So multiple standards that we're supposed to be teaching. Okay. I'm glad you put that on my radar. Maybe there's something.
And I can push that in science, like at their end of unit or end of chapter writing.
Mm-hmm.
I can push that.
And
that we're writing a topic sentence that we're explaining using evidence, but I don't always have evidence from the text used because a lot of it's evidence from.
But I mean, as long as they have that evidence, it doesn't matter for evidence from the text. As long as they understand this is how I produce evidence when I want to state a claim.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So I can, I guess, be hybrid
science,
science and writing teacher.
I still want you to stick with I agree. As long as they understand the science concept, I wouldn't take away points in grading for not RTQ.
Right.
But as much as you can encourage it and model it for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay.
Yeah. I agree.
I'm just gonna stop.